Welcome to another episode of the Everyday Expertise Podcast. I'm your host, Rolin Martin, and again, I'm on my own today, so bringing you another solo episode, but I'm excited to say that this is hopefully going to change next week. I do have a guest lined up. I'm going to try my hand at a remote interview, and so hopefully that will go well, and I'll bring you some content more in line with what I have normally been doing on Everyday Expertise. But just me again today, and I decided I'm going to talk again about some of the personal experiences that I've had, and this time it relates into what I'm doing currently, and that is that I'm a student. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my schooling experiences over the last number of years, what's got me to the point here where I'm studying physics at the University of Waterloo, and I'll share some of the experiences that I've had along the way. So first up, just a few things about me currently, and some of the things that I'll talk about here on the podcast. So right now, I'm a second-year student at the University of Waterloo. I'm working on a honors physics degree, which is a 4-year physics degree, and as I've kind of been alluding to here, I didn't get to this point in maybe the traditional way. So I'm not in my second year out of high school, and I've had a few experiences along the way to get to the point that I am now. I'm also going to talk a little bit about what the online experience has been like here. We've not been able to meet in our classes since mid-March of 2020, so it's getting close to a full year now. And so this is the second full term that we've had where everything's going to be online. And so it's been a difficult experience, but something that we're kind of getting used to, and I think I'm getting better at working with. And then I'll spend a few minutes at the end of the podcast talking a little bit about what my plans are, what I'm thinking for the future of my education. So I just turned 30 a few days ago, and it's actually on my birthday that I'm recording this podcast, but when it comes out, it'll have been a few days ago. And there's something about being a undergraduate student at 30 that feels a little bit older than doing it in my 20s, even when I was just 29. So I'm definitely older than most of my classmates. I've run into a few that are older than me, but that's definitely the exception. And so obviously because of that, I've had a number of experiences that have led up to the point of me studying for an undergrad physics degree at the age of 30. So where did my education career start, or how did it start that I'm back at school here at this point? Well, I would say as a child, I definitely loved school. I think there were several reasons for that, but one definitely was that I found learning to be easy. I always really enjoyed school. And part of the reason was because I found it challenging, but not overly difficult. And so learning came easily for me. I always really enjoyed reading, and that goes a long way to being a student, enjoying school at any point. And always really enjoyed studying and learning new things as well. So probably one of the things that I didn't realize when I was in elementary school and started to catch up to me a little bit when I got into high school was that I didn't develop a great work ethic because I didn't find school too difficult, and found it easy to get by, found it that I often didn't need to work super hard in order to get good grades. And so like I said, that caught up to me a little bit in high school, but I still, for the most part, found my high school studies to be quite enjoyable, not too difficult. But I'd still say I'm dealing with that somewhat now. And as I get into more challenging courses, I realize that I can't just float by. I have to just force myself to sit down and really work to learn or figure out problems and identify areas that I'm struggling with and work to fill in the gaps. So yeah, back to my schooling as a child. My parents were very supportive of education, and were helped me in school, made sure that I made it all the way through high school, and were very supportive of me continuing after high school into post-secondary education, but left that decision entirely up to me. They didn't push me to go to college or university, but they were very encouraging and didn't stop me from it either. But one thing they did and I remember my dad especially saying that he wanted me to take a break after high school and spend at least a year working. And so I did that. I ended up working 2 years after high school, working with my dad at Martin's Family Fruit Farm. We got into that a little bit on the episode 3, where I had my dad on, and I really enjoyed working with him, worked closely with him for those 2 years. Over that time, I had plans, and these were plans that had actually started in high school, where I decided that I wanted to be a teacher, and knew a little bit about the teacher apprenticing program that Faith Builders Education Programs in Northern PA offers. And so I'd heard a little bit about it and decided to sign up for that 2-year program. So 2 years after finishing high school, I went down to Faith Builders and started the teacher apprenticing program, and had a really great experience there. It's a close-knit community of faculty and students. It's a really small school, so it offers courses at a college level, so probably the equivalent to the first 2 years of college. The longest program that they have is a 2-year program, but it's a really small group of students. At the time I was there, it was between 30 and 40 students, and it's maybe a little bit bigger than that now, but not much. And so because of that, there's a lot of time for instructors to interact with students and for students to get to know each other well. And it's just a really great community feel that gets built there over the 2 years that I was there. So it was a really great experience, and I went into it without knowing really what to expect. I'd heard a little bit about it, but I didn't really know what I was getting into or what to expect as I signed up and went into it. And the thing that surprised me the most, what I didn't realize was a real strength of the program, was the strong mentoring program that they have. And there is a formal mentoring program that's in place, that's kind of run like a class over the 2 years that I was there. But they also have built a really strong informal mentoring program. And it's really an atmosphere that permeates the experience there of instructors taking an interest in students' lives, being willing to speak into our lives and to help us to grow, to help us to develop in a number of different ways, to help me develop my relationship with God, help me to think and to learn how to learn, and found that atmosphere to be really beneficial. The regular interactions with my teachers, the good friends that I built there, and that took the opportunity to regularly speak into my life. It was a really good experience. And I often thought during the 2 years that I was there that was the ideal life for me. And I think it really was at that time. I got to study. I had friends around me at all times. I got to participate in experiences like practicing teaching. I had time to think and to write and to develop philosophies about different parts of life, to think about what is truth and how to find truth. And it really was a good 2 years, and a 2 years that I still see as being very formative to the person that I am now. I went with a goal of becoming a teacher, and with the practice that I got, the classes also that I took that were geared towards education and learning about teaching and learning how to prepare, to be a teacher I found very beneficial. And after graduating from Faith Builders in 2013, I began teaching at the local school that I had attended for all 12 grades that I was in school, and got hired to teach mostly math and science courses. And that was because as a high school student, I'd been very interested in the math and science courses. I'd always really enjoyed math. I would always said that was my favorite subject all the way through school. And I wouldn't have said that I had a particular love, or I didn't realize it at the time that I had a particular love for science. But in high school, I had taken a number of science courses with the goal of actually studying horticulture. And I remember as I started high school, I was thinking about working in the orchard, possibly at Martin's Family Fruit Farm. And so that kind of pushed me to take biology and chemistry and some of those sciences. So I wouldn't have said that it was for a really love of science that I was taking those classes, but I did enjoy them and studied them a lot in high school. Faith Builders is a very broad education. So we take kind of a general history course, general science course, but we didn't really have time to get into anything deep. And so I didn't really expand on my science knowledge while I was a student at Faith Builders. And so jumping into teaching at Countryside, it was a really good experience for the teaching really helped to build my science knowledge and understanding. But I didn't have much background in the subjects that I was teaching beyond what I had studied in high school and what I was learning in order to be able to teach well. And it didn't take me too long of teaching to realize that this was the case, that I was really interested in science but didn't know much more about it than what I had learned in high school. And there were certain points in my teaching where I did feel really inadequate, that I didn't have a deep enough understanding of the topics I was teaching to really be able to teach my students well, to be able to inspire them and help them to see the bigger picture beyond what we are learning. Or maybe I'd explain it as helping them to be able to see where we were going with what we were learning. And it's not that they needed to be able to see that, but sometimes I wasn't able to see where we were going with what we were learning. And so it felt like we were kind of I was hitting a dead end in my teaching. So just a couple years into teaching, I started thinking about ways that I could expand my knowledge, expand the well of understanding that I was pulling from in my teaching. And so I'd realized at this point that I do much better when at learning, when I'm forced to learn. In other words, when I've signed up for a formal class or I'm taking involved in education somewhat formally. So a couple years after teaching, I applied to the University of Waterloo to do part-time studies there. And this was simply with the goal of expanding my knowledge, especially in the science courses that I was teaching. So I took a chemistry class, I took a physics class, I was taking some math courses, and was really enjoying taking one part-time class, one online class on the side of my teaching. And after doing this for a few terms, I soon realized that I would have to face a decision on what to do with my schooling going forward. And what I realized was that at first, with those first couple introductory chemistry, math, or calculus, physics courses that I took, I was able to do them quite well on the side of my teaching. And that was because the main topics in the course were ones that I was quite familiar with and knew quite well from teaching high school chemistry and physics, and had a good math base going into those calculus courses. So they didn't take a lot of extra effort, a lot of extra studying besides doing the work. I didn't have to spend hours trying to understand new concepts. They were mostly just building on the fringes of what I already knew. And so those first few courses that I did, they went quite well. I was feeling confident with them. But I started getting into a little deeper. So I took a second chemistry course. And this one quickly, within a few weeks of my online studying, it got to the edge of my knowledge much quicker than the first one had. And I soon realized that this was not sustainable long term, where I probably wouldn't be able to keep doing classes on the side, do well with them, and keep working full time at my teaching. So I got to the point where I would have to make a decision, where I would either have to stop taking classes for the time being and focus on my work of teaching 100% of the time, or I would have to stop teaching and go back to school full time if I wanted to keep at it and work on finishing my degree. So I decided to stop teaching. I decided that I was going to go back to school full time, work on getting my undergraduate degree. I should maybe just mention here that none of the courses that I took at Faith Builders, unfortunately, were able to transfer. None of the credits were able to transfer up to the school here in Ontario. And so I was kind of at square one as far as credits go. I feel like I had been given a good base and had learned some good study habits and techniques and things like that with my studying at Faith Builders, but I was starting from at the beginning again with my schooling here. So I made the decision that I was going to go back to school full time. And as I'm talking about it here, I realized that it sounds like I made that decision quite quickly. But it really is, it's something that took a long time to come to the point where I was ready to make that decision. Wasn't an easy decision. I really enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed my job, and so I was giving up something that I loved for the time being. But after praying about it, spending a lot of time thinking about it, talking to Joy a lot about it, sharing then after doing that for a while, sharing with trusted mentors who I really like and like to hear the advice that they give and really respect the advice that they give. After talking to a number of different people, I made the decision to kind of change, I guess you could say change career for the time being, in that my full-time responsibilities moving away from teaching and moving to studying. So came to that decision about a year before the fall of 2019 then, when I started back to school full-time, and I absolutely loved it. I remember it was already a few months, I think, into the first term there in the fall of 2019. I would regularly get to my seat in the classroom a few minutes before class began, and I would just kind of sit there and contemplate and be full of gratitude and excitement for the opportunity that I had to sit in a classroom and to learn. And I just love taking classes. I love learning. I love thinking and being pushed into new areas and new ways of thinking. And so really, really enjoyed the experience of being back in school and being a full-time student once again. I was working on it was called a general science degree, which is a 3-year degree, but it was very non-specialized. So it was pretty wide open. There was a certain amount of science credits that I had to take, but other than that, there really wasn't any specifications. And because of the courses that I'd taken ahead of time and I was going to be able to finish within about 2 years of starting to go to school full time. So that would be finishing up this term where we are here currently now, finishing up here in the spring of 2021. So with realized that I was going to be done in just 2 years, and I was also very much dabbling. So that first term of going back to school full time, I took a couple of science classes, but they were ones that I hadn't really taken before. It was a cell biology course, and I was doing an earth science course, both introductions, and I took an economics course, and I took an introduction to history course, and so it was very much, I felt like I was dabbling, and I was interested in doing something a little more focused and a little more specialized. So when we went into the spring of 2020, the winter term of 2020, I was really thinking about, okay, where am I going to go with this? And if I want to go a little bit longer than just a 3-year degree and want to get a little more focused, a little more specialized, I need to make that decision soon. So I was kind of thinking about what within science do I want to do? It was the science courses that I was really enjoying and were really pulling me. And in that course, or in that term, I had signed up for an introductory astrophysics class, I'll call it. It was called Introduction to the Universe, so a physics course. And the prof in that class was fantastic. I just loved his lectures. I would sit rap for the hour and 20 minutes that we had, and he just had really clear and concise ways of describing and teaching complicated concepts, and just had a really interesting way of describing them as well. And he also really insisted that we think like a physicist. So he would often say that, but he would also demonstrate how it is that a physicist thinks. And like I said, his simple but brilliant explanations really made the universe come alive in the way that he would describe them. And so I was already kind of thinking that physics might be something that would interest me, but taking this class really helped solidify that decision that it was physics that I wanted to pursue further. So I was basically in the process of making my mind up on that. But one of the problems that I have is that I tend to keep to myself a little too much. And it takes me a long time to get brave enough to kind of put myself out there and talk to people and ask questions or ask for advice. And so I knew that I should talk to this professor. He also happened to be one of the advisors, and I knew I should sit down with him and talk to him and just see if he would have advice on how to switch into a physics degree, or if that's something that I should do or would be prepared to do. And so I had tried a couple times, but it hadn't worked, or I'd kind of given up at that particular time. And so it hadn't happened. And this was getting into closer to the end of the term. We were about a month away from the end of the term, and it was into March here of 2020. And I decided, you know what, it's time that I need to talk to him. And so see what he has to say. And so he had certain office hours that were set, but I hadn't made an appointment or anything like that. So I decided that I was going to go talk to him. So I had a class at, I think it was about 1 o'clock that day, which were when his office hours ended. And so I went to, it was probably about 45 minutes before that, so about 12:15, I got to his office and he wasn't there. And it was a sign on his door saying he's gone for just a couple minutes, he'll be back soon. And there was another student waiting for him, and I asked that student if he was waiting for the same professor I was, and he said yeah he was. And so I'm like, well, I'll just wait it out. I got time here. And so waited. I had class at 1 o'clock, and so I thought, well, I'll at least wait until close to that. So I waited for 30 minutes, and the other student was was a patient too, and he was still waiting there also. And I thought, this is getting to the point where if the professor comes back, this other student was first in line, so he'll get to talk to him first, so I probably won't have a chance. And this was about 10 minutes to 1, and I thought, well, I'll just wait a few more minutes. So I stuck it out for a few minutes, and a few more minutes. About 2 minutes later, the other student left. He must have had class at 1 o'clock as well. And so I was the only one in line now, and it was getting to be about 5 minutes to 1, and I was just about to leave, and the professor showed up. And just in time, and he said, "Yeah, sorry about that. It was a unfortunate meeting that I had to have, and I was pretty sure I knew what that was about." But anyway, he was really nice. Talked to me for about 20 minutes. I missed the start of my next class, but that was okay. And so I just told him what I was thinking about, and he took me through the classes that I would have to take this year in order to switch into physics. And I hadn't had the best set of classes that I'd taken up to this point, but he was nice enough to work with me and look through what would be possible, and thought that it would definitely be possible for me to make the switch. So I had some good things to think about. This was on a Thursday afternoon, and we found out 2 days later that the school would be closing down for what we hoped would just be a couple weeks, because COVID-19 was hitting and was getting fairly bad in the region. And as we know, we're still, the school has not opened up. And I haven't been back to the campus since that day when I sat down and talked to him. So I was really glad that I had waited it out, and because without having that conversation, I really wouldn't have known what would have been involved in making the switch, and I probably wouldn't have done it. So I was really glad that I talked to him and kind of learned what would be involved, and had his encouragement in taking the dive into physics, which I've been doing, started last fall, and working on here again this term. So it's been a great experience. I really enjoyed getting back into university classes, and unfortunately have been now doing classes online for all of last term, and this term will be in its entirety online as well. And so I'll just say a few things, I guess, about what it's been like for me with online learning, and what my experience has been. In some ways, it felt like I was a student for the first time again, in that I just had to completely relearn how to learn, and how to set up my day, and how to take in classes, how to find information, how to get help. All of those things were completely new and had to be relearned. So maybe instead of being a student for the first time, it was more like I was going to a new school again for the first time, and was starting completely over. So it was difficult. I felt behind all semester and all of last term, and wasn't until kind of getting towards the end of the term I started realizing how I should have been approaching the different classes, and how different professors were setting up their classes, and how it would have worked better to learn and that kind of thing. But kind of on top of that, just looking at online learning as a whole, I realized that I do really miss the campus, the classrooms, the place to go to learn, and the presence of fellow students and teachers as well. And there's just something about having that place, having that physical presence that I think is really important. And I knew that was before moving completely to online, but since being online, I've realized how really important those things are, and I'm really, really excited to get back. to going to class, to being able to ask questions, to hear the lectures from the professors where they're used to teaching, not having to have constant technological things to work through and challenges and dealing with those things. Being able to do labs like they're meant to be done, and experience school in the way that it's set up to be done. So I'm really excited to get back to that. I'm glad that we've been able to continue with our studies, and that everyone's kind of learned how to work with it and present classes and information in a different way. But for me personally, it's not something that I think is going to stay. I'm really excited to get back to the classroom and get back to school, as it were. So what are my plans from here? My goal is to learn to think like a physicist and to learn as much physics as I can over the next 2 years. So at this point, I'm planning to graduate from my undergraduate program in the spring of 2023. So I have 2 years left after that. And hopefully I'll be at that point more of a physicist than I am right now. And I don't know where it's going to lead from there. I would love to go back to the classroom with a whole new toolkit of knowledge, wisdom, and experience with which to teach and inspire my students. But I'd also love to keep studying, and I'm going to leave open the possibility of continuing on with my formal education, my studies after completing my undergraduate degree. We'll see where it goes from there. As my experience has been in the past, it's just usually takes a year or two of being out of the classroom before I start itching to get back to some kind of formal schooling. I've never gone more than a year or two without taking a class of some kind. So I suspect I'll always have that bug, and we'll see if I continue after graduating this time. I am very thankful for the educational opportunities that I've had up until this point, and I'm really excited to see what adventures lie in front of me. And I'm glad to have the chance to share a little bit about you with what my educational experiences have been up to this point, especially as I think about that now, as I am currently a student and deep into my studies. So thank you for listening. Thanks for putting up with my stories. As I mentioned at the beginning, I plan to get back to Everyday Expertise interviews next week, so you can look forward to that. In the meantime, if you want to go to the website, everydayexpertise.ca, you can find all the previous interviews that I've done, all 25 episodes that I've had a guest on up to this point. If you want to reach out to me, you can do that through email at contact@everydayexpertise.ca or any of the social media platforms that we're on. And if you want to join me to share your expertise, or you know of someone that I should have on, let me know. I always like hearing suggestions. Don't know if I'll be able to do all of them, but I certainly love to hear the suggestions that you give. That's all for now. Join me again next week to learn from the expertise of everyday people.